All right. Welcome to the first. I would call this the first official episode of Practice Underwater, where we're actually having somebody's practice, and we've looked it up to our PBN shared practices dashboard. PBN stands for Practice by Numbers, and we looked at this office, and I think this is going to be a really great two-part series where we look at a lot of things that are holding somebody back, and it's kind of exactly what we're going for with metrics and mindset. So, Matt, just a little preview. How much did you enjoy this two-part episode?
I mean, this is why we started this podcast. Like, this is a perfect kickoff episode. It's a startup. This female doctor is killing it, but she still is falling short in so many ways in her mindsets. And you get into a lot of those in the main part of the interview, and we'll talk about them after the interview in the second episode. Super interesting. There's a lot to digest, but I think it's a really good kickoff for us. I'm super excited. This is our first one.
So we're sort of, we're really feeling out our formats here. This is something totally new that we've never done before. And this is like the first one I ever recorded. And I didn't spend a lot of time with the actual dentist going over their metrics. I sort of just kind of randomly called them out throughout the episode. And I felt like for you guys to get the full experience, you need to know everything that I had going into this episode. Because I feel like I could have and I should have probably done that in the interview. So, Matt, did you sort of feel like throughout the interview I'm kind of just calling out metrics without really explaining them or kind of talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it really portrays how real coaching isn't just a one-time thing. Like there's so much to discuss. There's so much to go over that just to do it in 1 hour time with the first time with this client, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. You're kind of all over the place, and that's a little bit unavoidable. She had a lot of mindset stuff that was needed to be unpacked. So I think that was more important to discuss in the first time. But we can talk about some of the metrics here now. I mean, you do talk about some big ones, but we can go through more as this episode starts.
So the first part might be a little bit shorter, but yeah, for me on air, what I was really trying to do was unpack the mindset, because I sort of already knew the metrics, and what I was really wondering are why the metrics the way they are. So we have on the show notes, you should see the shared practices dashboard. And so I'll sort of take it out and I'll walk you through what I was seeing when I was looking through it. So we have here, and we're going to work on the formatting of this dashboard. It looks a lot better on the actual software. But when we try to get it on a PDF format, I think it doesn't do its justice. So when we start at the top, this dentist is doing essentially about $100,000 a month is about what they're, last month, July 19, this dentist collected 110, but she said that she's sort of averaging around 100. And the only backstory that I really had before this interview was that she wants multiple locations, multiple doctors. And so that was sort of the lens in which I looked at this dashboard. So for me, what I saw was her hygiene percentage was about 15%. And that's something we're going to add to this dashboard. It's a lot of trial and error, but, the hygiene percent is about 15%. And so to me, I'm like, this doctor is really carrying this office on their back. This is somebody producing themselves. And, I was sort of wondering how that fit into the group practice model, because you put an associate in this practice and all of a sudden it's a totally different situation, because your hygiene percentage is going to be like 30% and you're going to do like half as much doctor production. And so this practice in my mind is, looking at it, I saw just so much doctor production. And if you look at the average treatment plan size, when you go down to the second page of this dashboard, the average treatment plan presented was like $2,700, which nationally puts this dentist in the 90th percentile. So that's like the one thing that really changes with another doctor is how much are they diagnosing per exam and how often are they diagnosing. So this dentist is diagnosing almost 60% of the time, and she is doing like $2,700 treatment plans, and they're being accepted at a pretty good clip. I mean, it's pretty impressive, how much treatment she's getting accepted. The one downside is her 64%, patient acceptance is a little low, but in terms of her total size of treatment, she's really diagnosing herself to her goals. And when I look at the restoration to crown ratio, it's about 4.5, which actually puts her in the realm of conservatism. I'm actually, my crown to filling ratio is half that. I do twice as many crowns for that number of fillings. And, I don't feel like I'm, my associate and I are about the same level. So, she's not, don't take my $2,700 average treatment plan size as crowning teeth that don't need to be crowned. That is not what is happening. And if we don't have it here, but if you look at her spread of diagnosis, it's very even. So it's not all major restorative work. It's a lot of a lot of ortho, implant services, night guards, fillings, crowns. Like she's really using her full repertoire as a dentist. And so when I looked at her, I said, okay, this dentist is having a startup that's doing really well. They have a high new patient flow. It's about a little bit over a year old practice. She's diagnosing extremely well, and therefore she's meeting her goals. And but again, I sort of came in with the lens that she wants multiple locations. And that's where things did not really make sense for me, because a lot of the things the practice is doing well are dependent on the dentist, and a lot of the things that the practice isn't doing well are dependent on the team, which is the thing that would really scale. So for me, that was looking at it, my biggest areas, and a couple other things that I noted when you look at this dashboard. If you go down to the top of the fourth page, a high number of appointments are failed, which is, just another sign of probably a young practice with, maybe some different scheduling policies. But probably the biggest thing that stood out to me was the AR. So this dentist has, a really high 90-day and over balance. More than half of her accounts receivable is older than 90 days, which just shows me a lack of organization in the front and a lack of, I guess, organization on the collection side of things. And so that really is... So again, that's like one of the most important things when you have a group practice, because you're going to put in a doctor who's diagnosing less, you're going to put in a doctor who's not converting as much treatment as she is, and the staff is, not necessarily collecting as much. So all of these things are really shrinking margins to the point where those are like, so it seems like the things that she's really working on are, her as a dentist, and the things that are important for her to reach the goals that she told me about pre-interview are office-based. And so that was the big thing that I really took away from the dashboard, was just that disconnect between what her goals are and what I'm seeing in my metrics. And so that was sort of what I took in. Matt, did you have any thoughts on her dashboard that I didn't already allude to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great case of someone who's set up a practice, very successful, probably is beating most startups within, where she is 1 year in. But like you said, there's a disconnect. Her vision for her life doesn't fit the numbers we see on this dashboard. These numbers are set for someone who wants to be a full-time doctor, who wants a lot of things to depend on themselves in the office, hasn't created a lot of systems where they can step away and the office won't miss a beat. It's clearly very driven on her skill, her personability, the way she connects with patients, the way she connects with staff, all great things. But the disconnect there is she has a different design for her life than a lot of dentists. She wants to be a mother. She wants to have multiple locations potentially. She wants to potentially have associates in there. And as you point out in this interview, that's going to cause a dip, most likely in her production, replacing herself with someone else who isn't as skilled and doesn't have, her skill set. So that's really the impact of having someone else look at the dashboard, because they can see, okay, these are numbers, and numbers are numbers, but what are they telling us? What's the story behind these numbers? And the story here is there is that disconnect. And I think, as we'll see in this interview, it's super enlightening for her to realize that, okay, I say I want this, but I'm doing this. So where am I getting lost in that? And that's really just a brilliant observation on your part.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into the interview, and then we'll listen to this first part, and then Matt and I will have a brief outro at the end, and then we'll go into the second part, and we'll have a longer outro where we talk about the whole story. All right, I have with me here today the first official recording for Practice Underwater with an anonymous practice owner. And just so she knows, her voice will be changed and information about her will be bleeped out so that nobody knows who she is. And I'm really, really excited about this episode because it's a startup, which I'm a really big fan of, and we've talked about it a lot on the show. But it's not just any startup. So this is just past its 1 year mark a few months ago, and this doc is killing it. And so she's doing really, really well. And she reached out. And so I think we'll just kind of leave it at that. And I just kind of want to ask, when you saw that we were looking for somebody for the show, what made you want to reach out and, see what's going on in your office?
I don't really track the numbers like I probably should. And so I thought it would be really interesting to really dive in deep into the numbers. I look at the typical new patients and collections and adjusted production. And those are kind of the only things that I've really looked at lately. And I know there's a lot more to it, and there's a lot that I'm probably missing.
So 1 year into practice ownership, how has it been going?
It's been busy. It's been good.
Yeah. So what is, I guess, what are some of the biggest challenges that you are facing right now in your office?
Staff has
Oh,
been the hardest thing for me lately. Finding a really strong front desk, especially.
okay. And have you had, like how many front desk people have you had since your year of owning the office?
I had one pretty consistently, and then after I knew that she was going to need to be changed out, and she left kind of unexpectedly, so I've hired three different people in like the last 2 months. A lot of turnover, a lot of crazy stuff going on, and it's very very hard because it's the only person I have up there. So, it's been very very stressful these last few months.
Well, yeah, I can imagine, but I'm sorry. I need to take a step back for our listeners just because I said you were killing it, but, we're all anonymous here. So I would like for you to tell everybody, about, this point, like a year and so in, what are you guys doing on a typical month in adjusted production?
A little over 100.
Okay. And long term, how many ops is your practice?
8.
So long term, what are your goals with your career in general?
Probably to cut back and either bring in an associate or a partner.
Okay. And are you thinking multiple locations or just the one?
Multiple.
Okay. And what is it about the multiple locations that really appeals to you?
I think if you keep a lean overhead, that you can make a lot of essentially passive income. And when I say passive, it's not really passive, but not clinical, not sitting in a chair, talking to patients, grinding out work day in and day out.
So is that, how long have you really had your sights on that type of multi-practice ownership or more passive income?
We just started really pursuing it very recently.
So
but the hardest part is finding dentists that we know would, I think associates are a headache. I think a partner model is more sustainable and works out better for everyone involved because everybody has a little skin in the game.
Okay. And so when you say very recently, how recent are we talking?
Maybe the last couple of months.
Okay. So when you initially opened up this office, you weren't like, this is one of many?
No.
Okay. So this was going to be the one.
Yeah.
And then did you feel like there's a fatigue factor to having this practice and kind of being in it a lot?
Yeah.
You sound tired.
Definitely.
So
it's especially, I've been doing like front desk in addition to being a dentist for like the past 3 months. So, I enter in, of those $100,000 plus in collections every month, I enter in every single one of those insurance payments because I don't trust my front desk right now to do it. So It's just a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. Oh man. So You would characterize yourself as feeling very overwhelmed?
I just know that I'm my biggest bottleneck in my practice right now. And I need to find people who I can delegate to because I can't have my hands in everything, especially if I want to grow.
Okay. And when you say like you need to, so you're your bottleneck because you have a hard time delegating?
Yeah.
What is the thing that's the most challenging about delegating to you?
Because I know that I care more than anybody else. And I know that the attention to detail that I put into something is going to be more because it's my practice and nobody cares about my practice more than I do. And I had a lot of mistakes happening. And so I'm trying to make sure that they don't happen again. And so my way of doing that is just doing it myself, which is a terrible idea because you get really tired doing that.
Yeah. I think the fatigue factor is definitely real with you, and I can see it in your eyes. We're doing video, but and I would have to imagine that the fatigue has a lot to do with your goals of multi-practice ownership, because I think that sounds less fatiguing because right now you're sort of doing everything.
Yeah.
I guess what I would ask you is, your turnover, is it only the front desk position, or are there other positions where you've kind of had some turnover as well?
No, it's really front desk. Finding a second strong assistant has been harder. Um, just because I feel like training new assistants is difficult, especially when you've got one that you kind of always work with and the other one just kind of cleans up behind you, flips over rooms, does sterile stuff like that. Well, they don't really learn as much if you're not letting them kind of get their feet wet, I guess. But it's been easier to find that than it has to just find a strong front desk.
So with the front desk, would you say, 3 in the last 2 months, what would you attribute that type of just not finding the right person? Do you feel like that's what's going on?
Hiring out of desperation.
Okay.
Also, taking a vacation in the middle of it was not ideal, but it was already planned.
That would make sense. So practice-wise, so we kind of have the issue with the turnover. Mm-hmm. Practice-wise, what else do you feel like is going on in your office?
I think that there's a big problem with case acceptance right now because, again, my front desk doesn't do treatment plan presentation. Patients haven't taken well to the girl who's there right now. And it's really hard to get people to accept treatment with somebody they don't like. And I just physically, my hygienist can only do so much. My assistant can only do so much, and I can only do so much. Luckily, I have very high new patient numbers, so we still get a lot of people doing stuff, but there's so much out there that I know that we're missing out on.
Okay. Is there like a particular type of case you feel like you're missing out on a lot of, or like, what do you feel like that's what's out there that you're not doing?
Just the stuff that's not covered by insurance, just like everybody else, if something's got a larger out of pocket. I also don't really have any good financing options in my office right now, which limits us greatly.
Okay.
Because everybody wants a payment plan, and I'm not a bank, but I think there's definitely, care credit rates, approval rates are pretty low. And so it's just been hard to figure out a good balance with financing.
Okay. And so we have the issue with your front desk turnover, which is kind of bleeding into, in your mind, your case acceptance. And what else do you feel like, are there any other challenges that you feel like you guys are facing right now in the office?
No, I mean, those are the biggest ones. Everybody else, the core team that I've had for a long time is really strong. It's just adding to it has been difficult.
Okay. So your initial front desk person, you didn't have any issues with them?
No, we did, but at least she was a hard worker, and I knew she wasn't stealing from me. And I've always been, she was a really hard worker, but she had her faults, and I was going to kind of transition her out at the end of the summer, but she had some personal issues and quit very unexpectedly because of those. And so, with zero notice.
Oh, man.
Yeah, walked out in the morning after, just came in and was like, I'm so sorry. This is what's going on. I quit. I was like, oh my God. Okay.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So looking back at your whole journey over this past year, did you think you would be at this point, at the beginning?
You mean like the numbers that I'm at? Or
yeah.
I thought it was we did a lot of research and we did our homework on the back end, but I don't think I would have ever expected it to go as well as it has.
Okay. So what would you attribute? So now we kind of talked about challenges. So things that have gone really well, what would you say your office's strengths are?
We just try to treat everybody right. And I know it sounds so general, but I think people know when you actually care versus when you're a number. And so we try to be very kind and treat people like we would our own families. We make a very strong point to try to get positive reviews and things like that. And our location is very, very, very important. Our signage is very, very important because unlike an acquisition, like some people I had no existing patient base. So I had to draw my patients from somewhere and I had to have a way to get people's attention. Okay. And so that's worked really well for us.
So you feel like your new patient flow has been one of your biggest positives?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess now, fast forward in the future, this office, in your perfect mind, what is it going to look like, when it's kind of really settled down and exactly the way you envision it? How many dentists are there? What are you guys doing? That type of stuff.
Probably 2 dentists. I don't really ever want more than 2 hygienists. I think it's very difficult to do productive dentistry when you're getting up 4 times an hour to go check hygiene. I would like to see, and it's pretty much all specialty procedures kind of being performed under one roof. I don't think we'll ever need more than like 2 to 3 front desk, even with all those people. I hate overinflated staff. That being said, I do need 2 people up front. And so, but it's just finding one would be great right now. But, I just think keeping everybody on the same page and, finding doctors, maybe Dr. A likes to do crown and bridge and implants and Dr. B likes doing ortho and pedo. And so, maximizing the space that we have, and keeping the office open. Like right now, we're only open 4 days a week, kind of staggering schedules so that we can accommodate people on all days.
So are you Dr. A or Dr. B in this example, or are you out of this practice?
There's certain things that I enjoy doing more than others. And I do a fair amount of ortho, and I don't mind like crown and bridge, but there's, certain things that I prefer not to do. And so I might just do like kind of the procedures I like to do and then only work a couple days a week.
So you're like part-time Dr. C?
Yeah.
Okay.
I could do that.
All right. You can do that. So that appeals to you because it feels like it's a lot less, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel like you're carrying the whole practice on your shoulders?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's sort of what it looks like to me. When I look at your office on paper, I see like a super dentist dependent practice. It just feels like, and I think the part that really surprises me when I look at it is how good you are as a dentist. Like, yeah, you gave me this face, like you don't believe it. So how do you think you do as a dentist? Like, as a producer, how do you feel like you are?
I feel like I do pretty much bread and butter dentistry. I do extractions and endo. I don't do any implants. I do a little bit of ortho. I feel like I'm pretty average. I think I don't know.
So you felt like your success in this office was not due to you as a dentist?
I guess though I say that, but then my husband always tells me that it's absolutely that's why you wonder if you can do it again. If you wonder if your success is based on just the fact that it's you, or is it a model that you built that's scalable? So I don't know.
Do you feel like it's you, or do you feel like it's the model?
I guess it's probably me. I care a lot about my office and the reputation it has and it being successful. So I guess it is probably, I know it's very dependent on me. And I think having another dentist in there, I don't know that it would have been quite as explosive as it has been.
Before we get back to the episode, I wanted to take a minute and thank Practice by Numbers. Without their help and allowing us to set up the shared practices dashboard, a lot of what we do on Practice Underwater wouldn't be possible. I want to take a minute and highlight a clip from the episode that we did with Rohit, where we highlighted some of the metrics that really matter most. I personally really like the dollars scheduled metric because I always like to see, am I growing? Am I in which direction are we going? We should be at least scheduling more than we're producing because usually some patients drop off. So I think that's kind of a good place to be. And so when I have a client and they just had a bad month and they're feeling down on themselves, I can always look at their dollar schedule to see which way are they trending. Are they going to have a big month next month? Like, can they cheer themselves up knowing that they're scheduled in a growth trajectory? Or are they ultimately, I need to say, hey man, you got an issue. I know you just had a good month, but you're setting up yourselves up for a couple bad months. And, then they can turn it around. But I think having that heads up holds you accountable as a business owner, where you're not relying on how much money did I make this month. And that's how I know, how things are going. I think you have the heads up one way or the other. I hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you guys are interested in trying out Practice by Numbers and looking at your practice through the Shared Practices dashboard, and there are many other dashboards, you can go to practicebynumbers.com and set up a free trial. So the first impression I had when I looked at your dashboard was, damn, this dentist is killing it. In the sense that as a dentist, like if we were to switch places, my office would grow like 40%. Not even
Really?
close. Oh yeah. If you look at dentists across the country, especially the ones that use Practice by Numbers where we can compare their metrics, you're in the top 10% of treatment plan size and total amount accepted. So you do treatment plan a lot of stuff and you diagnose, well. And when I look at your spread of diagnosis, I don't see a heavy one thing or the other. It's not like you're doing a ton of crown and bridge or you're doing a ton of fillings or a ton of ortho. It's like a very even spread of distribution, which lets me know you're not over treating things. You're just treating everything. And I think that's a really hard thing for dentists to do because you have to have the clinical skill set and the eyes to see things that others aren't. So, one of my biggest concerns is that if you get another dentist in that office, the biggest strengths right now is your eyes diagnosing and treating things. And so that's the hardest thing to transfer over. So but you have this face on you where you're like, I can't believe that that's actually the case. So tell me why you don't believe that.
I don't know. I think it's just when you're like so tired and you're so bogged down in the weeds, it's just nice to hear like a good job. Like I know that the office is doing like numbers wise, like yes, but some days can be so long. And sometimes you're just like, am I doing this right? Like what in the world is happening? And when you're sitting there, like some days, especially since I've had this new girl up at the front that I just literally hired out of desperation, I had nobody. And I'm just like, I have been sitting around for like 2 hours. What is happening? I never sit for 2 hours. I usually don't get lunch. And so when you see days like that, and I guess one of my biggest problems is like, you don't have to be like ridiculously busy to be productive. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I just haven't gotten past that. I'm like, I need to be moving and going all the time. And I don't know. It's just been a weird transition time. And I know things are going to get back to it, but the passive stuff is kind of the stuff that I want more of, where I do sit around a lot more because my assistants take over the ortho, or, I just go in and prep the crown and then the temp and everything is just, my assistants now know how to do that. So that's wonderful. So now I don't have to sit and do that either. And so, but a lot of times I feel like I just want to be busy because I feel like I should be almost.
And what do you feel like when you're not busy? Like, why is that so uncomfortable for you?
I hate it because I feel like I can do a lot. I mean, like I know the numbers I can put up if I'm busy. So I'm like, we could be making this much dollars if I did this, or if we had a patient scheduled here, or if this person was confirmed like they were supposed to be, or if this slot was filled. And I don't know.
So talking to you, it seems like right now the amount of money the practice makes is very important to you.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because the way that my husband and I have set up what we do is I was able to take a risk on my practice because he had a very good job doing very well. And now it's my turn because he's taking a risk. And so we've always kind of set up our lives. We don't live very extravagantly or anything like that. And, should something not happen how it go according to plan, it's not going to be a big deal because my income and what my office is doing can easily carry us both. So
it's a lot of weight to be carrying on your shoulders every day. No, I mean, it is. That's a lot. So I guess the biggest challenge I see is going from making a lot of money to having a lot of passive income, right? That's a big mindset shift because I feel like right now it's so much about, this month.
Yeah. Well, and we did look at bringing in kind of like a partner, and it didn't work out for a couple of different reasons. And I'm really glad that it didn't, because I don't think that I was ready to give up half of my new patients, half of my production, half of my office, essentially, quite yet. It's still like, it's my baby.
Okay.
And I'm very like I said, I'm my biggest bottleneck. And I know that that's one of my biggest problems is because I like to make sure that everything is just right all the time.
So there's a little bit of like a control thing here, you know,
Yes.
and I'm saying a little bit, I'm using that word, but I'm not necessarily meaning that word. Uh, so I get the control thing. I guess what I want to ask you is, let's just say control thing isn't a problem, right? You don't have a problem with the control. You could clone yourself. So why do you feel like the practice is ready for another doctor?
Because if we have a really strong, but by the way, I don't really market much right now, like at all. I don't do any mailers. I barely do a little bit of Google and a little bit of Facebook. And that's literally because I've tapped myself out we can't accept many more new patients. My hygienist is booked out. You'll have a couple patients fall off here and there, but for the most part, she produces much more than, 3 times her base or her salary.
Is she assisted?
Kind of. Sometimes she falls behind. And so my assistants, they can floss and polish. And so they'll, take her x-rays, they'll floss and polish for her because I always tell her, I give her a flat hour, whether it's a recall, a new patient, or anything. And she is wonderful at patient education, but at the same time, sometimes she's kind of chatty. Mm-hmm. So, but I always tell her her least important job is actually cleaning teeth. The most important thing is educating patients. Like, why do you need a deep cleaning? Why do you need a crown? Why does this big filling look bad? Because people don't understand. We take intraorals. She throws them up on a 50-inch screen so they can look at them. We have a digital scanner that she can actually show in color, like, this is what's going on. This is why your teeth look this way. And so I will sometimes, I have 2 assistants, and one of them a lot of times will be helping her kind of stay on schedule, flop in between her 2 rooms. So I guess she's assisted as needed, but never intentionally.
Okay.
Because I don't want to burn her out.
That makes sense. So, but carry on as to why you don't feel like you're ready for an associate.
I think it's just a personal thing. Like, I'm not ready to give up because I know that I'm going to have to take a cut in what I'm doing, and I'm perfectly capable. We don't have a family yet. It's something that's hopefully on the horizon. And so I want to make sure that I can maximize my time now while we don't have children and all this sort of stuff versus, trying to work as hard as I can when I have, small children at the house.
Yeah. So when you see yourself having kids, do you see yourself still working?
Yes.
How much would you work after you have a kid?
I'm not really sure. I'm probably going to have to be told to stay home, honestly. But I'd still like to work, just a couple days a week. And like I said, the business side is really interesting to me. I enjoy kind of looking at stuff. I enjoy doing the marketing for my practice. I enjoy doing stuff like that, which is probably another reason why I'm so tired is I literally don't outsource anything. On my one day off, the practice phone forwards to my cell phone, and I answer the phones.
Wow. So it seems like your actions and your goals are kind of heading in opposite directions.
Yeah, actually, now that we kind of talked through it, probably.
You're telling me you want passive income and you want an office that sort of runs without your involvement, where you can hop in and do your stuff while you have your kids and your family and all that stuff. But everything you're doing is sort of cutting costs, making as much money as possible, and doing all those things that will never allow your perfect situation to happen.
Yeah, I think I probably just am trying to. My husband is the exact opposite for me. He's super type B, just goes with the flow. The business model he is adopting is, very much dependent on a very strong manager. And I see the appeal of that. I just haven't found that person to kind of help me run things. And I think my biggest urge right now, I'm not really just looking for a front desk. I want a really strong office manager, and I would happily pay them based on the profitability of the office, well into 6 figures. if they could do what I needed them to do, if they could really take charge of my practice and, you know, help it grow and care about it like I do. I just haven't found that person yet.
Yeah, and I think you've kind of said it a lot of different ways, but you're kind of saying the same thing. You're saying, I'm tired, I'm sick of carrying this load, and I want somebody or something to kind of relieve me of it, because it's a lot and it's exhausting. Yeah. And you know, so I feel like anytime you sort of think about, well, I really want this, you know, it's always nice to kind of look into that and say, what is it about that you really want? You know, whether it be the multi-locations, the associate partners, the, you know, office manager, it seems like you're kind of screaming at yourself for help because you want somebody or something to kind of take the load off. And, but are you okay with making less money if it takes the load off?
Something. Yes, I am. It's like, we have plenty, and my husband always says that, and he's like, we don't need it. Like, why are you doing this? And he always tells me, like, but like for me, like, especially right now, you know, with him doing something and with us not having a family, it seems like, why would you not work, just like bust your butt as hard as you can right now so that you can kind of breathe a little bit later? I don't know if I'll actually breathe when later comes, but that's kind of like my thought process, I guess.
Sure.
It's like bust it as hard as I can, but I also don't want to burn out.
Yeah. And I get that. And, you know, I feel like you're growing your practice right now, right? Like this is a time in your life where you're really growing your practice. And I feel like it's that kind of main concept that you're like, okay, right now, don't have kids. This is a perfect time for me to throw everything into my practice and really grow it. Mm-hmm. So right now you guys do about 100 a month, you know, so over a year, that's 1.2 million. So let's just say, is that where you feel like you're at? Like we're a $1.2 million office?
Yeah, about.
What if I take you out and put another dentist in?
I don't know. I'm not really sure. It depends on how much of a hard work, like how much they want it and how much of a hard worker they are. Cause there are days, like a lot of days where I won't eat lunch or I stay late and, you know, I do a lot of stuff that I don't think a lot of people would do.
Have you ever met anybody else like you?
Not really.
So like chances are you get another dentist in there. Do you think they're going to be like you?
Probably not.
Probably not. So I'm a lazy dentist. So put me in your office. You know, what are we doing now?
I'd probably kill you.
Exactly, right?
But that's
you totally would.
But that's truly why I think that a partner model is probably one of the most sustainable ones that you can do, because everybody does have skin in the game. And while, you know, yes, you know, everybody gets a cut of the profits, you know, that dentist is only, you eat what you kill sort of thing, you know, and I feel like it has a lot more accountability versus like an associate headache. Because I've worked in as an associate, and I'll tell you, I'm a phenomenal practice owner. I'm a terrible associate because I know exactly, you know, I can't sit back and like watch something be run terribly and be treated poorly. Like nobody wants that. Nobody wants to work hard for somebody else. It's just human nature. And so, but I do think the production of the office would probably drop drastically if it wasn't me in that office.
Okay. So give me a number that you think.
I mean, maybe 800.
Okay. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
You know, for me, if I'm in your office, it's doing about 700. And I'm not kidding. You know, I just think it's important that you recognize that, because you take yourself out of the equation. That's really what you've built.
Yeah.
Put yourself into the equation, and that's what's burning you out. And so it's, you know, long term, you can't keep putting 150% into something. You know, it's just not sustainable. And I think you've kind of found that out. All right. So the first interview of an actual anonymous dentist on Practice Underwater is in the books. Matt, did you? I was talking to this dentist. We were doing like video with audio, and so I could see the exhaustion on her face. Could you hear it as you were listening?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and when you call it out, she kind of sighs and gets into this like realization, like, oh yeah, I am. It's like a weight off her shoulders little thing. Like everything felt so heavy. The beginning of the interview, she's real short. She's real like deep in her voice. And then kind of when you break down that ice of, you seem really tired. She kind of like puts it down for a second. And is like, oh, I recognize that. And, it's just like a whole different person after that.
So I think we've all felt this. And this is not just this dentist. I mean, there's been times in my office where I felt like, man, I'm really driving the ship. Like if I don't go to work and I'm not on, then we're having a bad day. And the office is not going to perform well long term. And that feels that just that pressure is to me was so exhausting. And that was really, there was a month where, I did that and I made a lot of money. And it was probably the least happy I'd ever been because it just felt like I could not sustain that for the rest of my career. Have you ever had like a moment like that?
Yes, sure. So you have come to this realization and you've designed your practice to basically avoid this, which is credit to you. I haven't gotten there. So I'm very much in this dentist's shoes where things are depending on me in the office. If, they're just, all the systems are based on me being there. And it is exhausting at times. It's something that I'm starting to realize, this interview even drives it home further, where it's getting to be a level of a pain point where I need to make a shift. So this interview, spoke to me the whole way through.
Well, that was, the intent was to change Matt this whole time. That's exactly what I was thinking about, nice. But I think if there's one thing to take away from part one, it's really how to date, like part two starts with metrics and we start talking about her numbers and her goals and everything. But I think it's just that she wants multiple practices because she's tired, and it's important because I hear somebody's goal and I almost need to extract from it. What is it about that goal that appeals to you? Because on a lot of levels, this dentist is kind of, as currently constructed, not really well fit for that model because it's a lot of delegation. It's a lot of not doing things yourself and a lot of having a practice that kind of runs for you. And so for me, that was the biggest disconnect I saw. And so I was really excited to start asking her about her mindset and start unpacking it. And so for me, that was a lot of fun. My favorite part of this is when you say something and then they have that moment of realization where they're like, oh, yeah. So I felt like for her, this first half really showed the impact of the type of model that she's doing on her energy levels and, the sustainability of it.
Yeah, it's like anything else. It's with a goal. Goals are meant to unlock something that couldn't be possible before and now is possible. And she thought that getting to multiple practice ownership, she would get to what's possible is more freedom. I heard more like less on her shoulders. And as you pointed out, multi-practice ownership would just be more on her shoulders. And that's where the real disconnect came is like what she really wanted. She thought this is the way to get there. And then, with some reflection, with some talking through it, she realized this probably isn't the way for her. So it's just that disconnect even further drawn home.
Yeah. And I'm excited for part two. So we'll see you guys next week. And part two will be a little bit longer of an episode where we'll go through the second half of this interview. And then Matt and I really have, a lot of analysis afterwards. So I hope you guys like this first part. And then we'll see you guys next week to talk about the second part of the show. Thanks for listening to another episode of Practice Underwater. If you want your practice to be featured on the show, you can email practiceunderwater@gmail.com. That email is in the show notes. And if you're interested in coaching services from Matt or myself, you can go ahead and send us an email. Our emails are in the show notes, and we'll get back to you promptly. Thank you once again for listening to Practice Underwater, and we'll see you next week.